Seamless transition.
Seamless, absolutely. And I'm going to use the mic.
Please use the mic.
All right.
Why don't you introduce yourself and everybody?
Mike, my name is Chieppo. I run a little public policy writing and advocacy company, and I'm also a senior fellow at Pioneer Institute and have been writing about charter schools for more than 20 years.
I think you guys might remember me. My name's Matt O'Brien. I'm president of the Worcester Tea Party. And, you know, we are an educational organization, and my wife works as a lunch lady. Hey, somebody's got to feed your kids. They get hungry.
That's right. Do they?
Well, okay. I'm glad you came back to me. I'm going to throw out a couple things here, just like I did to the other back and forth, and we'll get your opinion. I happen to know a young man very, very well who last year decided he wanted to volunteer somewhere after school to help underprivileged kids. It was here in Worcester. I'm not going to say the neighborhood, and et cetera, et cetera. But he told me one late afternoon how frustrated he was because he said he has like 20 third graders that he is trying to tutor. And the homework assignment was there were squares and triangles on multiple ones on pieces of paper. And they were supposed to circle the triangle and put an X in the square. And all these kids sat there dumbfounded, Worcester Public School, and didn't know what to do. And finally, after about 10 minutes of him like not understanding what was going on, he said to the kids, "Don't you know what a square is?" And they all went, "Oh yeah, like that." "What's a triangle?" "Yeah, like that." So then he quickly figured out what the problem was. The third graders couldn't read. They couldn't read the word square, and they couldn't read the triangle. So whether you're for or against public schools or charter schools or whatever, it's obvious in many cases public schools just aren't cutting the mustard. So how would you two answer that?
Well, first of all, I'd answer is to make sure to say that charter schools are public schools. But you know, the second thing I would say is that, you know, to a certain degree, the statistics bear out what you're saying. You know, charter schools in Massachusetts are mostly in urban areas. And the fact of the matter is that there is not a single urban charter school student that is in an underperforming school. Every single urban charter school in Massachusetts is either a level 1 or a level 2, which are the two highest levels of performance for Massachusetts schools. By comparison, 50% of the students in traditional public schools in urban Massachusetts areas are in underperforming schools. And if any, I think if there's any statistic that better describes the need for more charter schools in Massachusetts, I don't know what it is.
Okay, I will attempt to answer these questions, again, not in my own voice because I'm not the expert here, but
So can you change your voice for us?
I would like the voice changer, please. But I think Mr. Tito Jackson, the Education Committee Chairman from the city of Boston City Council, he expressed that we are talking about taking funding away from existing schools, moving the funding to schools that don't even exist yet. And that would be 12 new charter schools in the Commonwealth every year for then forward. He would contest that the reason why those children do not know how to read is because they are in not just an underperforming school, but an underfunded school.
More reason to legalize marijuana and get all the taxes.
Yeah.
Except I'm going to state that in this state we do not have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem.
It's true.
Okay. It amazes me that so many different newspapers that are 100% opposed to each other, and the biggest one that comes to mind is the Globe, has come out and said that charter schools do not take funding away from public schools.
True.
And
Other folks.
other public schools. Okay. So, why is there a debate on that? Because it should be easily found out whether or not that is correct or not. And I also would like to put in there that when we do have underperforming regular public schools, why can't we just give them more money? You know, why don't we build them up? And I also think that there's the reason why you see so many negatives against charter schools is because the other schools are quite embarrassed, I think, that they're not doing the job.
Yeah, I mean, look, the problem is that when you have failing schools, you know, Massachusetts has the most progressive funding in the United States. Depending on, if you have low-income students with various other characteristics, you get more money. I mean, low-income, unlike in most places, low-income schools in Massachusetts very often are getting more money than other schools. Money is not the problem. You can't simply take an underperforming school and give them more money because they're going to be an underperforming school that's spending more money. You know, that's not the issue. The issue here is how the money is spent. And the fact of the matter is that charter schools are spending their money better. But in terms of the funding, the funding it's a very good point because you say, how can they say that? Well, I would argue that they can say it because it's the only thing they have to say. The reality is that just in the last month, you've had the Boston Municipal Research Bureau, you've had the Mass Taxpayers Foundation, you've had the Brookings Institution, you had a long litany of these studies that have come in and said the same thing. Charter schools in Massachusetts do not siphon money from other public schools. The simple reality is this. Massachusetts has the most generous charter school reimbursement formula in America. When a student decides to leave a district school in Massachusetts and go to a charter public school, the money for that student follows him or her. But what happens is that the school district is then reimbursed. The first year after a student leaves, the school district gets 100% of the money they would have gotten anyway from the state, even though that student is gone. For the next 5 years, they get 25% a year. So at the end of 6 years, that school district has collected 2¼ years worth of funding for a student that is long gone. This is by far the most generous reimbursement system in the country. And to just give you some comparison, the two cities that have the highest percentage of charter school students in the United States are New Orleans and Washington, D.C. In both New Orleans and Washington, D.C., the reimbursements are 0.
Yeah.
Mr. Matt.
I would contest, and again, the words of Marty Walsh, Mayor of Boston, said the following public hearing hosted by the Joint Committee on Education. To put it simply, this proposal does not provide for the substantial charter school growth that the proponents seek. It would instead wreak havoc on municipal finances.
I have a question for you working for Pioneer Institute, so if you take off your hat for the side that you're on, do you happen to have figures on what it costs to educate a student in a charter school per year and a student in a regular public school per year?
Yeah, I mean, basically, they get the same amount of operating money, but the reality is that charter schools get less money, and here's why. Because, as I said, the money follows the student, but that's operating funds. Regular traditional public schools in Massachusetts have access to facilities money through the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Charter schools do not have access to that. All charter schools get is a small per pupil capital allotment, which is a fraction of what district schools get for their facilities. So, one of the kind of classic class warfare arguments that the other side is making in this is this argument that says, that says, oh, well, look at these charter school boards of directors. They're all venture capitalists and hedge fund managers and investment bankers. Well, you know what? If you gave them the same access to public facilities money that district schools have, those boards would be full of teachers and parents in a second. They are what they are because it's the only way they can be in order to actually have buildings to educate these kids.
Mr. Matt?
Let me quote Senator Elizabeth Warren. I'm voting no on question 2. Many charter schools in Massachusetts are producing extraordinary results for our students. And we should celebrate the hard work of those teachers and spread what's working to other schools. But after hearing more from both sides, I am very concerned about what specific proposals mean for hundreds of thousands of children across our Commonwealth, especially those living in districts with tight budgets where every dime matters. Education is about creating opportunity for all our children, not about leaving children behind.
I'm trying very hard not to be sarcastic.
I'm trying to do the best I can.
I guess I just have to say, I'm wondering if she went to a charter school or a public school when she was on the reservation. But anyway, I didn't think she got the Harvard there. All right. Well, anyway, this is really obviously a hotly contested question. And I wish we could really find out the real reason that so many people are against it, because everything that I've ever seen shows that charter schools are positive, and they obviously are doing more with less, because I didn't even know about that building situation that they, I was actually going to ask you guys, like, do you know that, they seem to have better facilities and newer buildings, and why are the public schools so run down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And from now what I'm hearing is there's one reason, because there's people who understand money overseeing the school adverse to people who just want to spend money.
I think there are two basic reasons why that animate the opposition to this. One is simply that teachers in charter schools are not required to be unionized. So obviously teachers unions want members. They are not guaranteed members through charter schools. That's number one. Number two is I would simply ask you to find a monopoly in the history of the world that has said, okay, competition. I'm going to give up my monopoly. I welcome this competition in.
Like,
Those are the two reasons why there's opposition to charter schools in Massachusetts. Monopoly.
Oh, right.
does anybody have any questions?
I have one last
You
quote.
got one last thing?
I have one last quote I'm going to.
How do you feel reciting so much?
Are you ready to throw up yet? I will tell you, I was taught to debate, unfortunately, by Catholic nuns who assumed that I would be arguing against the Pope and playing devil's advocate for some reason. So this is not that alien to myself. Alexandra Griffin, a contributing writer for Williams Record, wrote the following: education in Massachusetts should be a public good, guaranteed to all, guided by the public values and accountable to local communities. Lifting the cap on charter schools in Massachusetts opens the door to increased privatization, creating educational institutions governed by the rule of the market, with little obligation to respond to the values or needs of the communities they are in. Stand with the students, teachers, staff, unions, and other public school stakeholders, and vote no on this ballot initiative. It is a critical move to protect and strengthen Massachusetts public schools.
Who said that?
This is
Sorry.
This is so excited.
This is Alexandra Griffin, contributing writer for Williams Record. I'm not familiar with Williams Record, but I believe it is a publication for the teachers union, for the Massachusetts Teachers Association.
Yeah, well,
The one thing I would say about that sort of doesn't make sense is, it's not gonna reflect the community values, except for charter schools are schools of choice. Nobody gets assigned to a charter school. If it's not representing the community values, a student or that student's parents will simply choose not to have their kids go to the charter school. So I would say that charter schools fail to represent community values at their own risk.
I have a question.
Yep.
How do you make it easier to get into these charter schools?
By raising the cap, then, 12.
The law is only 12 schools. They're
12 new-
statewide, they're
12,
talking
yeah.
about the mayor's thinking they're all gonna be in Boston, I think, but.
12 new or expanded charter schools each year, limited to the 25, the school districts that are in the lowest performing 25% statewide. So you're not, just as there are now, there's not going to be charter schools opening up, in Weston. And, they're going to be, they are
You're gonna be in
already, and they will
Worcester?
continue to be located overwhelmingly where they're needed. Yeah, Worcester's at about 25%, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I heard that there's 32,000 students that are looking to get into charter schools, and that's the reason that they need this. I also heard it was on national television. I was watching Newsmax, and they were speaking very highly of the charter schools in Massachusetts. But I also heard a teacher say he hated this bill because he's a teacher, and he said if the students don't behave or they get suspended from a charter school, then he has to deal with, this student that can't handle it. And they're going to end up with all these students that are very
I'll take the
difficult.
other side of that question. I'm gonna say that I would bet that the discipline problems within a charter school are dramatically less than they are in a regular public school.
Amen. She was saying the public school teacher didn't like it because they kick them out, the bad kids out of the charter school.
And
Yeah, you're right, that's what
That's
I'm
one of the
saying.
other claims,
Yeah.
that's one of the other claims that's made. Unfortunately for them, the facts don't back it up. The reality is that even in Boston, which are the place where the suspension and expulsion rates are the closest, charter schools have no higher attrition rate than traditional public schools. In other places around the state, while they may have sometimes a higher suspension rate, in other words, a kid may be suspended for a day, in terms of a kid actually being expelled or sent out of the school, those rates are actually lower than the traditional public school rates.
But his point was, in a public school, if you have a bad kid like that, you've got to deal with them.
And charter schools are dealing with them too because they're keeping them. They may decide, they may choose, the strategy may be to suspend them for a day, but they're not having them leave the school.
Anybody else?
So I just said, if there were no charter schools, that teacher would have to deal with that student anyhow.
Right.
But
Right.
I wanted to ask, how long does it take for a charter school to get approved in Massachusetts?
Well, the way the process works is that essentially in the fall, there's a bunch of applications get sent in. Usually by the winter time, it's whittled down to a group of finalists. Every year at the February meeting of the Board of Education, Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, they generally vote on the finalists for a charter school. So schools will be approved generally in February, and those schools will generally either open the following September or the September after.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to tell you why I would vote against question one, and then tell you why I would vote for it, so you can make your choice either way. First of all, people have to realize that in almost every charter school, it's not people like us who are the ones who are running them. I have found over the years that it's mostly the educational flakes who are running them. and they get the better students often, and that may be why they survive better. And of course, it's still taxpayer money, so if you're against the concept of stealing money from some people to pay for others' education, you should be against all public schools. And that's why I would vote against this. Now, the reason why I would vote for this is because the National Education Association is opposed to this. And there is no organization in the history of the United States that has done more to advance the cause of communism than the National Education Association.
Amen.
You know, you actually, just as an aside, you bring up one very interesting topic that very few people are aware of. The, you know, the no on 2 ads that you see constantly on television, at the end of one of them, they have a little blurb that says, you know, opposed by every school district in Massachusetts, every school committee in Massachusetts, and opposed by the PTA. Well, 2 things about that. First of all, I mean, this just in. I mean, what school district is going to ever say anything good about a charter school? Because school committees want control, and charter schools are outside of their control, so they're not going to say anything good about it. And I would also say with the PTA is a very interesting thing, because those of us at a certain age, you know, when we think of the PTA, we think of June Cleaver, or, you know, a world that's no longer here. The reality is that we need to make a distinction between the PTA and the PTO. In Massachusetts, only 4% of schools have a PTA. The reason is because the PTA is such a highly politicized organization, which for a million years, until just recently, shared its headquarters in Washington with the National Education Association. So just a little tidbit on that. The one thing I would, though, mention that you said that I want to respond to, you talked about a claim that opponents often make, which is that charter schools tend to attract more affluent students with more involved parents. And because that claim has been made so much, there is now in the last few years a whole series of studies that have controlled for that simply by doing this. As we said before, there's 32,600 kids on the charter school waiting list in Massachusetts. So you've got a lot more kids wanting to get into charter schools than you have spaces. Admission to charter schools is based on a lottery. So you have to enter a lottery to get into a charter school. So what the academics have started to do is that instead of comparing charter schools to the surrounding district, what they now do is they compare charter school students to students who put their names in the lottery but were not selected. So that thereby controls for this idea that only the more affluent, more involved parents put their kid's name in for the charter school. And even after doing that, the numbers don't change. They perform far better, and they're better on every level. So I think that this whole selection bias thing has pretty much been put to bed.
All right, well, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, you have a question?
I just
Oh.
asked.
No.
I would just say no, because this would affect this teacher ratio and much needed supplies for the schools they already need.
For the regular public schools?
Yeah.
Well, no, it won't, because you have to remember, again, it's not a bad deal. You're losing a student and then getting paid 2.25 years worth of funding after that student leaves. Charter schools dramatically increase the amount of money and the amount of per pupil money that goes into public education, simply because to deal with the backlash against them, the state is having to kick in a lot of money every year in these reimbursements. The reimbursements are a state budget line item.
So, I'm an engineer, and I like looking at data, and I think there's no more of a controlled experiment than New Orleans. So, New Orleans before Hurricane Katrina had your standard typical educational system with all the bureaucracy and all of the organizations. Hurricane Katrina came, wiped everything out, and everything had to be rebuilt from scratch. Can you talk a little bit about before and after and any differences?
I know something about this because back in my youth, I used to work in college admissions, and I used to go to New Orleans and visit all those schools back in the day. So I actually know a little bit about it. A couple things I would say. I want to be clear and say that nationwide, I would not sit here and argue to you that in America, charter schools are wonderful. Charter schools are uneven. In some places they're good, in other places they're not so good. In Massachusetts, they're very good. Massachusetts has the best charter schools in America. As for New Orleans also has very successful charter schools. And that's why I can describe that, is to say that now, post-Katrina, almost 90% of public school students in New Orleans attend charter schools. It is an almost, the traditional district essentially doesn't exist. You know, it's just a conglomeration of charter schools. And New Orleans is about to become, since this change occurred, the only major American city whose scores are above the average of the state in which it's located.
And what were they before?
And they were below sea level, like most of New Orleans.
So, I mean, that's a very clear indication.
Yeah.
Anything else? Did you have one more?
I just wanted to know, are these records available, the comparison of, how much funds are given to charter schools and then the reimbursed money to the public schools?
Yeah, I mean, this is all,
Yeah,
this is all just, state government formula. This is all done by formula. It's all in the legislation.
But say, for example, the charter schools in London, so if we were to look at the records from the school committee.
Yeah, you can go on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education website, and you can see exactly what money gets converted to a charter school, how much money the state then pays back to Marlboro in reimbursement. It's all available on the DESC website.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Does a great job on a lot of things, and I haven't said this to Matt, but I am working on something for, I will say, maybe a next springtime type meeting. I have to find a way to interview this gentleman after he retires and definitely disguise his voice. I have a close friend who has been in the process of being one of the superintendents, I'll put it that way, in a various position of a new school being built in a better neighborhood. And he is so upset that after he retires, he wants to find a way, one, to protect himself, because he would really fear retaliation in some way, shape, or form. But he wants to share some of the stories about the nonsense that went into the building of this new school. And I think you're all going to find it very interesting, and I can finally get that done. Matt?